Hey there, we're the Westlaw Pirates and welcome to the show. We're here to share thoughts on Northwestern athletics and college sports with thoughts and analysis from the visceral to the statistical. We run our tailgate with the red pirate flag flying high above as we give no quarter, especially the fourth. I'm Sam Walter.
And I am John Lacombe.
Scuzz is off for spring break. We were off last week because I was off for spring break. Right in the middle of the NCAA basketball tournament, hockey tournament, and spring break, I found myself up in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. Absolutely gorgeous. But what was interesting is last Wednesday when my family and I drove up through the Smokies to the Tennessee-North Carolina border. We all happened to be wearing our Northwestern purple, and realizing that Lacrosse was going to be playing North Carolina later that evening, we said let's cross the border and give a little Northwestern juju to the ladies as they head out to Chapel Hill. And oh boy, I guess it worked.
We're not saying Sam made it happen, but we're not saying that.
No,
Sam
we sure aren't.
It was amazing.
Yes.
We talked about it online earlier in that day, that it's like, you need a cure for what ails you. Go beat the number one team in the country in their barn, and that's exactly what they did. It's amazing, and obviously in between that horrible weekend with the Syracuse and OSU losses, and I don't think we've potted since then. I mean, this all happened, right? I mean, I think
don't know. No, we did talk about them curb stomping Oregon, didn't we? No, did we?
No, I don't think so.
No, we didn't. Yeah, they went out. Went out to Eugene, 17-3, curb stomping of Oregon, and then
and that was
out to Chapel Hill on the 25th,
which seemed like a necessary get right coming out of that horrible weekend. And it was like they totally outclassed Oregon, and it was like, great, that's the right foot. But then I think the feeling was kind of like, okay, but this is a team that clearly is working out some pretty major issues, right? That were exposed in that home weekend. And that's coinciding with them having to go on the road to play the number one team in the country. And instead, it's just like reminded you the very best of this team and what they're capable of. And just Kelly and Monty Hiller. I mean, that. We talked about it. That's one of the worst home weekends this program has ever had in the history of the program.
It's wild to even think that, but you're absolutely right.
And to have that and immediately turn it around, and from a leadership standpoint, get your team and your team leaders to dig down and find a way to turn that into improvement, and then to get better, and then to go out to this team that they've been in this death grip with for years now, right? Just this dance that these two juggernauts have been in with each other. And I think, what was it? North Carolina had won 31 in a row at home since Northwestern had beaten them
in
home.
2024. Yeah, 2 years ago. North Carolina had not lost a game. Was it lost a game or lost a home game? Because
no, they hadn't lost a home game. 31 straight at home, and then the Cats went down there and beat them again. And from the very beginning, you could just tell how dialed in Northwestern was. And we were joking,
even though they were down 4-2 after the first quarter. I mean,
right. But I mean, it was like, that's like 4-2 to North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina's just been shredding everyone this season.
Yeah, that's true.
And being kind of like, hey, we're in striking distance right now. So far, so good. But it's just funny, we were joking, we ought to just slap a top 3 ranking on every team we play from here on out. Because when it was Boston College at the beginning of the season, the Cats blew their doors off. And then just the whole way. And I think one of the things that people have talked about this season and has been kind of a thing with this team, and it's, we kind of wrote it off at the beginning just because if you look at the raw numbers, someone like Aditi Foster's pouring in goals too. But there is this feeling that obviously all these defenses are completely keying on Maddie. And in the North Carolina game,
Let's
they
be
really
clear.
got
That's Maddie Taylor, not
right.
Maddie Epke, who we'll talk about
Yeah,
here
right.
in a sec.
Yeah, true, exactly right. I mean, there you've got excellence in multiple places here, but the Cats were getting goals from everywhere, and then in goal, Jenica Cuoco, just an amazing performance. I mean, yes, 16 goals given up, but this is North Carolina, and they were throwing the kitchen sink at her down the stretch. A couple unbelievable saves, leading. I mean, I think you had there was there's one that I feel like I'm forgetting, but then in overtime, that unbelievable sequence where
Yeah.
UNC gets the free position and you're like, oh my gosh, this is it. What a brutal way to go out. She makes this unreal save. And then the Cats turn it around to the other end. And then, of course, like Maddie T does what Maddie T does and delivers this unbelievable goal, and the Cats win it. But it was just, they were so locked in from the very beginning. And yeah, like we should all expect that and everything, but just this is a team that again got just kicked in the teeth that weekend at home, and then since then has been lights out. Just to respond that way. To take that kind of thing where suddenly everyone's like, "Oh no. This hosting of the Final Four doomsday scenario is a real possibility." And just to stare into the void like that and then to turn around a performance like this, just unreal.
Yeah, and to take that, to take the emotions of going on the road and coming off the huge win against number one, come back, and like at this point, the Cats are ranked number 11. They lost to 2. They had been number 1. Right, they were number 1, right, or top. Were they?
I don't know if we ever got. I don't know if we were ever number 1. We were either
okay, but
one
we
or
were
2.
we were up there.
Maybe
we were,
2. Yeah.
Yeah, but regardless, up there, you lose 2 in a row, dropped all the way down to 11, right? Come home after huge emotional win at North Carolina to take on a Johns Hopkins team who's sitting at number 7, and you've had your last 2 home games have not gone well, but for them to then come back, take on Johns Hopkins, knock them off 16-12. Things are looking better. Things are whatever happened, like whatever get right needed to happen at Oregon, going on the road to North Carolina, you come back, you lay one on Hopkins, and now all of a sudden it's like, okay, all of us, that going to the Final Four at home is not as out of the realm of possibility as we thought, a week and a half ago.
Also, it occurred to me like we sort of got the amusing impression when we had Coach Monty Hiller on the pod last year that there's like this little tight circle where all the greatest coaches in like coaching history all seem to like talk to each other and everything, and she and Bill Belichick are close, but in that vein, like she took a little page out of the Kurt Signetti playbook here and imported a big time transfer from James Madison University and Maddie Epke, who went off against Johns Hopkins University. Like you were saying, it was a two-headed Maddie monster for the Cats against Hopkins.
6 for Taylor, 5 for Epke.
Yeah, it just an explosion, which is awesome. Just to find just another breakout game from another big time transfer. To go with the other explosions that the Cats have having. Now, again, as we've talked about, like it ain't perfect. Now, granted, these are some really good teams, and if you look at 3 of the last 5, Syracuse, Hopkins, North Carolina, these are obviously very good teams. The Cats are giving up goals, and I think defense is clearly an issue on that. And we talked about that. You lose a Sammy White back there, etc., and we're getting scored on. And this Hopkins game was another game that was neck and neck. The Cats were only up 1 at the break. And, they've given up 28 goals in their past 2 games. And granted, that's the number 1 and number 7, and they won both of those games. But clearly is a little bit of a track meet situation. And if you look at 4 of the last 5, they're all, pretty white knuckle affairs. So obviously the defense is going to have to grow. But it all just takes a backseat to the fact that, again, this team is very aware of the stakes and of the situation and of the fact Northwestern's hosting the Final Four and on and on. And to have that one weekend go the way that it did and then to respond like this, it's excellence.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of thing. That's why this team stacks national titles. That's why Coach Kelly and Monty Hiller is the greatest who's ever been. It's the ability to look into situations like that and forge excellence is just incredible.
And now we got USC coming in on Saturday as part of the this giant day of lacrosse at Martin Stadium. This is their first game outside on Saturday, and taking on USC. Also part of this is the Notre Dame men are taking on Richmond. So this is a great double header of lacrosse, both men's and women's lacrosse, happening this Saturday at Martin Stadium. So that'll be huge. Speaking of huge, after this USC game, USC comes in, they're 6-7 on the year. They're not good. We should be able to take we need to take care of business here. I'm not going to say it'll be a cakewalk because there's no such thing, but this is a game we should win. The following game, you're looking at a Thursday afternoon
5
game.
days later. Yeah.
Yeah. On April 9th, heading out to College Park, Maryland to take on the Terps. North Carolina being, the big rival right now, but you can't talk lacrosse and not think about Maryland. They're there. They're right there. So,
and the Cats have been, locked in death. They're these teams have multiple Big Ten championship games against Maryland, and this unreal bounce back is this unreal bounce back. But it's also true the Cats have left themselves with very little margin for error relative to the postseason. Obviously these last two are massive chips to have, but every one of these is huge, and Maryland was already going to be huge. So yeah.
Yeah, Maryland, then at Penn State, home for Rutgers, and then finishing off the regular season at Michigan. I wonder if they'll just stick around in Ann Arbor because the game on the April 18th against the Wolverines, and then the Big Ten tournament's in Ann Arbor a few days later. So, obviously, it's only a 4-hour drive back. So I would imagine they'd come home and then head back out, especially if there's a first round bye or something like that. You wouldn't want to stay Saturday through Thursday. You wouldn't even really want to stay Saturday through Wednesday, but that neither here nor there. But still, that is what we're looking at as far as the rest of the regular season goes. The Big Ten tournament, and then as we say, the NCAA tournament, which will wind up that last weekend in May at Martin Stadium. And hopefully, the Cats will have a home game there in the national semis. So, we'll see how that goes, and go from there. Now I think we were going to talk about softball here, but I need to go. I've got something I need to take care of. So we're going to go ahead and leave it there. For tonight.
Go ahead. Why don't you just take your win and leave then, Sam? Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for listening. No, but seriously, is that not the most ridiculous? To kind of set the stage here. The Cats are playing Oregon in softball at the field in Rosemont. So that's another aspect that I want to talk about, but. Oregon has to go catch a flight. So they hit this drop dead time and the game's over. What?
This is I can't let's start. I'm sure most of you are probably aware of this already. And for those of you the teams agreed to the drop dead time before the start of the game, and TSA situations being what they are and airport lines, and you can go shovel all this crap somewhere else, but do not shovel it to me. This was horseshit. This was ridiculous. There is no earthly way that Coach Drohan, There's no earthly way she wanted to do this. This was a pivotal series on the season for this team. She's got her team playing their best softball. You've got the story of the season, really, right now. You can argue, with the exception of that North Carolina upset for Lax, the story of Northwestern spring sports right now is the current ascendance of Marina Mason, right? We
Yes.
talked about at the start of the season that it was kind of pitching by committee and how that's such an unusual place for Northwestern to be because we're so used to just having had an ace for year after year after year. Well, we've got an ace now. Whoa, Nelly. Marina Mason, she throws a no-hitter against Illinois and comes within 1 inning of throwing 2 no-hitters. She pitched 14 innings against Illinois. 13 of them were no-hit innings. Absolute dominance. And then she rolls into Rosemont and cooks Oregon. That was a game, and in a head-to-head duel, Oregon's pitcher is one of the best pitchers in the nation. Oregon's pitcher, and it became kind of an interesting story, the Rosemont field is a turf infield, and you can't rub dirt on the softball. And for pitchers who are used to really getting a lot of dirt on their softball and like the feel of that, apparently it's disorienting. It was not a problem for Marina Mason. And the bats were all over, and Oregon was just kind of a mess in general, and the wind and the weather were crazy, and we kicked the crap out of Oregon in game 1.
This is a number 17 ranked Oregon. This is like a top 20. This is a really, really good Oregon team. 24-9 on the season.
Right. And then going into the rubber match, you think there's any way that Coach Drohan is okay with one of the teams having a 3:30 p.m. hard out on a Saturday to end this series, okay? And then as a second part, I don't care what these teams agreed to. I don't care what the conference agreed to. Do you think that if anyone actually took the time to step back and realize what a potential shit show could result from this, that they ever would have allowed this to happen? I hope not, because this is your best softball team in the Big Ten since, like, not including the Pac-12 teams over the past 4 seasons, certainly, facing with UCLA the best incoming Pac-12 team. And this is your chance to show everyone, well, for all of these travel problems and all the logistics and blah, 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 we are able to give you a product like this. The old meets the new. 2 powers collide, etc. And for it to be short-circuited in the stupidest possible way, at the stupidest possible time, because we haven't even gotten to that. This is so for anyone who doesn't know, it's 7-3 Oregon in the bottom of the 7th. But then Northwestern loads the bases with 1 out, chases Oregon's pitcher, and Bridget Donahue has a 2-0 count with Kelsey Nader on deck. And Bridget Donahue's the tying run and Kelsey Nader's the winning run at the plate. There's 1 out. We've just chased Oregon's pitcher. And it's like, if you're wondering what was about to happen in that situation, maybe you haven't watched Northwestern softball for the past 5 years. But these are the moments. These are the moments, Sydney Supley, who called all the games, play-by-play for that series, she has sat on that bench and in that dugout and been a part of a million amazing comebacks like that. Everyone knew what this smelled and felt like. And then just all of a sudden, on a Saturday afternoon, they're just like, nope, Oregon's got a flight. And it just ended.
And what's ridiculous is, like, you look at the box score, it says it's a 4-2 loss.
Right.
In 6 innings. Like, the 7th inning just didn't count.
Right. And it's like, and you can go and be like, yeah, I mean, it's like presented to both teams like the same. I mean, this was, again, any Northwestern fan is going to agree that the basically being like, look, the rules being the rules, this could have happened to either team. Yeah, but it sure seems to happen to Northwestern a lot, doesn't it? Anytime something like this happens, it sure seems like it's the Northwestern Wildcats who are getting the short end of the stick. So obviously, Northwestern Nation's livid about this, but the Big Ten should be livid about this too, because it's a manifestation of all of the fears everyone has about the kind of crap that's going to happen when you pull the Pac-12 in, submarining all of the hopes of all the good things. And it's like you've got these two softball powers meeting in this titanic matchup, and then in the worst possible way, it is short-circuited. And truthfully, this caught a lot of national traction. And a lot of people, I think saw Stu Mandel talking about it, saw Reddit CFB talking about it. Like a lot of people noticed how much of a disaster this was outside of the softball world. And I think it's the kind of thing where like, I don't think it's going to be allowed to happen again, but that doesn't help us any. And it doesn't help every Northwestern fan feeling like they were robbed of an awesome comeback that wins a series in your home opener against the number 17 team in the country.
And they're in Rosemont. They're literally across the street.
They can see the frickin' airport.
Like planes are landing overhead while they're playing. Like seriously? Like you can't get like a police escort or something just to like whisk them in? Like I get you're not chartering a plane. You can't just rush them onto the tarmac. I get that. But like book a later flight, guys. You're going west, right? Book a later flight. There's a million flights.
They don't play again in over a week. Again, it wasn't even on a Sunday. It was on a Saturday. It really, honestly, it could not be much worse than it was. The only way it could be worse if Northwestern had one less out on the inning. But it was still one out with a 2-0 count to Bridget Donahue with Kelsey Nader on deck with the bases loaded. Like, it truthfully can't get much worse. And it is going to be the thing that surely every Big Ten person, hopefully across all sports, is thinking about when they try to prevent this kind of crap from ever happening again. Again, it's like, yeah.
And like this sort of reinforces the whole reason for the Pac-12, like the four Pacific schools being in the Big Ten is football. Like this is just another, feather in the argument of just bring them in for football. There's no reason you should be making the non-revenue sports deal with this kind of travel nonsense, right? I'm sure Oregon didn't want, I'm sure like, okay, they'll take the win for sure, but like, that doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth. Like,
no, and
you want to like one more pitch and you get a ground ball double play and you're out of it. That's what they want. And you're telling me like we can't wait like 10 minutes to get out of this inning. Like, okay, if we tie it up and it goes to extras, fine. You want to call it a tie, fine, whatever. Not fine, but still, like that can't feel good to them either. Why? Like this? Why are we putting these non-rev schools, these non-rev sports, in a situation like this? You want to put football in the Big Ten, fine, but the Pac-12 should still exist in everything else.
A lot of people, speaking of football, a lot of people, including us, made the same thing. That is, can you imagine for one effing second this being allowed to happen in football? Give me a break. Oregon's at Ohio State. Ohio State's on the comeback trail in the fourth quarter, and Oregon's like, oh, we got to go. Flight to catch. We'll just take that win. Got to go. But from the non-rev thing that you were talking about, too, I'm sure, y'all know Sydney Suplee, who, again, play-by-play for this series and was awesome. Obviously, friend of the pod. Not putting words in her mouth, but I am sure what she would say is, as an announcer, taking off her Northwestern hat, what she would say, former Big Ten pitcher, is that this submarined what should have been the story of the weekend, which was Marina Mason going head-to-head with Lindsey Grine for 2 games, and both of them pitching lights out, and Mason, this ascendant young player, proving that she's at the level of one of the Big Ten's very best. That should have been the story of the weekend. This great matchup, again, old versus new in the softball, and it was all submarined because of this stupid thing that was allowed to happen. So again, I bet you it ain't ever going to happen again after this, but don't it always seem like it's Northwestern that has to be the test case to eat some crap like this?
Yeah, right. So we got this weekend series against Michigan at
Biggie.
Rosemont. Big one. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. With the lacrosse games happening.
Yeah.
There's definitely you got a 7:00 start on Saturday night. You got a 2:00 start in Evanston for the lacrosse game. It is very reasonable to do a little doubleheader.
That is true. Anyone who could, and certainly if you live in the west suburbs or the southwest suburbs or the south suburbs and you're going to that lacrosse game, there's no excuse not to stop in Rosemont on the way back. Make that a double. This is the only time where, unfortunately, we're really going to feel that, shoot, if only the new J was open at this point, because having a Michigan series for softball the same weekend as lacrosse, as lacrosse week in Chicago, would have been awesome. And that's definitely something that we probably would have roped ourselves to. And that's one where doing a double would almost be a must, right? I mean, this is Michigan and Northwestern in softball. And as it is,
that's one of those we would have like ramped up the tailgate, we would have fired up the grill and like definitely, whipped something up for both of those. Like we did a few years ago for the double.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right, and that's the thing is like, because for Women's Non-Revenue Sports Weekend, which was 2 springs ago, and we've been really kind of searching for another opportunity to do that, where like the lacrosse softball stars kind of align in that way, and this would have been that weekend. But it is what it is, and for anyone who can, it's still big time. And again, for anyone who wants to have a fun Easter Sunday on the back of the lacrosse game on a Saturday. You've got that 2 p.m. what may be a rubber match, or certainly is game 3 against Michigan. So it's again, taking it back to softball, Northwestern is cresting. This is a team that was in a bad way and then got right big time and walloped a bunch of small programs, but then carried that right down into Urbana-Champaign and rocked, obliterated Illinois in 3 games. And then rolled right into Oregon and jumped all over them and run-ruled Oregon. And then again, we're robbed of another game that very likely could have been a series-winning game. Northwestern softball's dialed in right now. They're rocking. They've got Marina Mason. She's got lasers shooting out of her eyes right now. She has arrived, and the bats have arrived with her. And this is a good team that is loaded for bear now, right in time to face the Michigan Wolverines. Like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, we got like we say, Michigan for 3. Then we got a game against DePaul on Tuesday the 7th. Then they head out to Penn State for a 3-set against the Nittany Lions. They travel to Notre Dame for 1, and then get Michigan State at home on April 17th, 18th, and 19th, and then the season kind of continues from there. Yeah, so we'll obviously see where things go. We're all still real salty about this drop dead nonsense, but like you said earlier,
drop dead indeed.
Exactly. If you or a loved one is seriously injured by someone else's negligence, hire Kent Simpson of the Simpson Law Group. After over a decade prosecuting murder cases in Chicago, Simpson opened his own firm focused on wrongful death and personal injury cases. He specializes in car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and other transportation accidents, as well as construction accidents, medical negligence, slip and falls, product liability, and more. Millions recovered for clients. No fee unless he wins. The Simpson Law Group. Compassion, empathy, and vigorous advocacy. Go to simpsonlawgroup.com or call 312-332-2107 for a free consultation. And go Cats. Let us turn our attention to the other diamond, baseball, which they had their trip out to the West Coast. We talked about them heading out to Oregon to play number 21. Yeah, they got beat on Friday and Saturday. Friday pretty bad, 20-6 in 7 innings. Saturday was much closer, 6-4, and then That Sunday game, 11-10 in 12 innings. Took him to extras and came away with a dub.
That game was a absolute white knuckle ride, and it was an unbelievable win. The Cats had a huge lead, and then Oregon stormed all the way back. It went to extras. Northwestern went deep into the pen. You go into the end of regular time, and then into extra innings, and Drew Dixon, Dominic DiLoretto, Justin Fryer, these guys all came out and threw big time innings in short relief. 1 inning, 2 innings, 2 innings pitched, and that's Matthew Kauser, really strong starting performance. I mean, it took a lot of guys to make it happen, but again, Northwestern was staked to such a big lead, and then Oregon storms all the way back. It goes from 10-2 to 10-9, and that feeling where it's like, oh man, like this thing has caved in, and that's it. And it wasn't. It was McElpatrick singling in Kucherek in the bottom of the 12th or bottom of the 12th, and the top of the 12th. The top of the 12th. And then Justin Fryer with the big closeout, and it was awesome. It was a really good game. Now, we talked about this last year with baseball, and it's certainly true this year that it's obvious that this team is trying to turn the corner from a culture standpoint and to get over that hump. And it's really difficult. Again, this is a team that if you look at the past 20, 30 years, the amount of winning or even non-losing seasons you can count on one hand. It's just that is what you're up against here. And they, in between, they staying out on this West Coast trip, and in between this Seattle game, they play up the Portland Pilots, and they lose 8-3. So that was kind of a downer. But even then,
come on, Scott. What are we doing there, Scott?
Yes. Scott Sevich's Portland. Yeah, what can you do for us, Scott? But even then, they then play Washington in Seattle. They split the first 2 games. They win another close one, 10-9 in game 2, and entering the back half of game 3, it is really kind of right on the edge. And then Washington has a couple 3-0 innings, 3-run innings, and the Cats end up losing 7-2. And it's like those are the margins, because if the Cats had been able to turn that one the right way, and here's a good time to mention that Game 2 of that Oregon series and Game 2 of the USC series the week before were both really close affairs. And it's like if the Cats win either of those 2 or get this third game against Washington, it really feels like everything is exactly on track, right? I mean, if they win Game 3 of this Washington series, it's like, boy, they stole a game from 2 phenomenal Pac-12 teams in USC and Oregon, and then took the Washington series. That is right where this club wants to be. As it is, they didn't pull that Washington result out. So it's like, those are the margins. It's that tight. And, again, this is a team that there's, 3 against USC and 3 against Oregon, having just barely played Georgia Tech. No one in the country played a tougher stretch of baseball than Northwestern did through that stretch, that through those 13 games. And to take a USC win and an Oregon win out of that was fantastic. Now the Cats are pivoting towards a place where it's not those kind of heavy hitters. And now the Cats have got to start stacking up some series wins here. This is where you really hope, okay, all this potential we've seen through some of these great teams, now you look at the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games, and it's like, now we got to go on a heater. Like if this is going to be that corner turning season, like this is where it's got to happen.
Yeah, Tuesday, today, well, if you're listening to this the day it comes out, Tuesday against Valpo, 3 o'clock first pitch, free admission at Rocky and Bernice Miller Park. Then they got a 3-game set against Michigan State. They play UIC, and then home for Purdue for 3. Another game against UIC, then Michigan for 3 in Ann Arbor, and then kind of go from there. Bradley, St. Thomas, they go back to Minnesota to take on the Gophers. I don't think they're going to be playing in the Sandcrawler this time, but thinking back to the games at Viking Stadium, which kind of bookended the Jack Loush playing baseball in a football field and football in a baseball field.
I was about to say that's the other Northwestern Sports. I think it was Northwestern Sports, or if it was the Big Ten Network, had a great Jack Loush feature up that we retweeted on our account. You can go back and find it. That's just awesome that he talked about his whole road through high school, through the recruiting process and what it looked like, and the whole thing of being heavily recruited for baseball with football almost as an afterthought until 1 week before signing day when suddenly that Northwestern offer shows up. And then the road that we're all so familiar with from that point on. But that was really cool. And then he continues to just be such a singular athlete. I mean, he's out there in center field. Against Washington, he made multiple highlight reel catches in the outfield, just a couple unbelievable ones, and continues to have the power at the plate and everything. So it's really cool. But again, it's you can look at the season so far, and Northwestern, between every guy in the starting rotation has had special moments. Every guy in the pen has had special moments. They all had special moments just in that one Oregon win. And the Cats obviously have a lot of power, young and old, longtime Northwestern and transfer, all in the same team. It's all right there. Everyone can see what this team has right now. And now they're playing a group of teams that aren't exactly a murderer's row. And now it's time to, put that all together, lock that in, and string some wins together.
Speaking of stringing some wins together,
excellent transition.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We have a new women's basketball coach, and this is a huge hire. Carla Berube comes over from Princeton, where she's been pretty incredible. In 7 years at Princeton, 5 Ivy League championships, 5 NCAA tournament appearances, 2 wins, 2 trips to the round of 32. She's a winner. I mean, she's won everywhere she's been, from going back to her playing days when she was part of that UConn squad to win their very first national championship under Gino Auriemma, knocking off Tennessee for that very first time. Berube was on that squad, and now she's been coaching for 26 years now. 835 winning percentage at Princeton. This is a slam dunk of a hire.
It's unreal. I mean, I think we confess, and I think probably most of you would confess too, to being not plugged in enough to women's basketball to be aware through all of this, particularly outside of the power programs, what the entire coaching field looked like. But all the people who know, the second this hire, everyone was like, oh my gosh, what a home run hire. And yeah, it's the accolades are insane. 531 and 125 as a head coach, on top of another 132 and 8 at UConn as a player. This is a D3 National Coach of the Year, 2-time Ivy League Coach of the Year. You mentioned the 5 consecutive tourney appearances with Princeton. Had COVID not happened, there's no reason to believe it wouldn't have been 7 consecutive. The first of the 2 COVID seasons, Princeton was 14-0, and then they canceled the tournament. Princeton was the best team in the Ivy League that year. They were going to be going. And then the season after, they didn't have a season. And the season after that, they went 14-0 again and did win the season. So in other words, she put 14-0 Ivy League seasons together on both sides of the COVID era. And then as soon as COVID ended, they went to 5 straight tourneys. So this is an unbelievably successful coach, and successful at the D3 level. Again, National D3 Coach of the Year at Tufts. And then another piece of it, we talked about this relative to the tourney, and certainly early on in the tourney, I think a lot of people were looking, and this is one of those years where it was so glaringly obvious because you had Siena on the men's side putting the fear of God into Duke, which, spoiler alert, it didn't go well for Duke after that. But
yeah, right.
But Siena really playing Duke tight. Meanwhile, on the women's side, if your seed had 2 digits in it, you got erased. That happens every year in the women's tournament. It tends to be, right? If you're not from a major conference and you're up against one of those blue bloods, you start seeing those 100 to 50 type scores in the opening rounds. In the context of that world, Carla Berube, not only did she go to 5 straight tournaments, she beat North Carolina State in the first round with Princeton. She beat Kentucky in the first round with Princeton. She lost to Utah in the second round by 8 in a game that would have sent them to the Sweet 16, and lost to Indiana by 1 in a game that also would have sent them to the Sweet 16. She's just a winner. It's kind of crazy. I mean, I think every Northwestern fan kind of had the reactions like, well, geez, if we would have known this candidate would have been out there, this would have been our number one candidate the entire time. Because obviously the academic piece fits. So I think everyone at Northwestern's super stoked about this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of excitement, and we'll see what happens, as we move forward. But just today, she got to campus with her family. We see the requisite, welcoming by, Chris Collins and the Drohans and, everyone, with the program is like, welcome.
I think she made her way straight over to Walter Athletic Center, right post that Johns Hopkins game too, and had a little talk with Kelly Monty Hiller too. So
yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, just a great hire, and can't wait to see where this goes from here.
The other piece of this that is certainly related is, I think, obviously within Northwestern Nation, one of the names, not just this year, but really 4 years, as the Joe McEwen era was winding down, one of the names was most commonly batted about potentially for the Northwestern job was Kay Popovic-Goss, who, of course, Northwestern assistant coach. Like, this is a big time member of the Northwestern family. Then this is someone who went to Bradley, and she was really successful at Bradley. And I think everyone knew she was going to be jumping to the next level, which is exactly what happened. She went to Boston College. She's Boston College's new head coach. And it really feels like this is one of those dominoes moments, because I think given her connections to the Northwestern program, her love for the Northwestern program, that was probably I think most people are going to think that was probably the first look, right? And I think from Northwestern's perspective, it probably took a coach of the caliber of Carla Berube to get ahead of someone like Kay Popovic-Goss, who, again, is such strong ties to the program and that everyone thinks the world of. So
and we kind of talked about it when she got the job at Bradley. Like, this is sort of the stepping stone, and she would be kind of the next coach up after McEwen left. We talked about this back then, and
right.
It was sort of just like, okay, that would make the most sense, and that's kind of what we thought would happen. But then, they went out and they got Berube. But yeah, I mean, Kate Popovic-Goss, she's going to be just fine at BC. I mean, that's a great move for her, a great move for her family. I mean, BC's a hell of a program.
And you hope, given that it matches up in so many ways, that a Big Ten ACC challenge, she comes back with the BC Eagles, that would be really cool, right?
For sure.
And obviously would be welcomed with open arms by this family. So we're really excited to see her moving onward and upward. I think everyone knew that was going to happen. And I think, she'll go on to great things. And we are going to be super stoked with Carla Berube.
Finally, tonight, with the spring quarter starting at Northwestern on campus, we got news today. Spring football practice is back underway, with including all of the transfers that came in. The football program, put out a tweet, with the silhouette of Aiden Childs throwing the ball, tagging him in the tweet, and it's like, okay, spring ball is spring quarter is here now. All those transfers who left their programs at the end of fall semester couldn't come on campus because of the window of the transfer portal being what it is. wouldn't have the opportunity to register in time for winter quarter, but they're here for spring quarter. And the football team has staggered the spring practices. We were talking before the pod a little bit. I can remember several years ago that the football spring practice would start early February. I mean, they would just get so much of their spring ball in winter quarter. But with the transfer portal being what it is, and the academic calendar being what it is, we talked last year that Mark Jackson came in, was able to make some changes to the way Northwestern did business, and we were able to be in on all these transfers. And then they changed the transfer, like the NCAA's transfer window changed. And I thought for sure we'd be thinking about, well, where was the hue and cry? I was thinking we're screwed now. We're not going to be in on any of these big name transfers. And yet there we were, in the mix for guys like Aiden Childs and all the other transfers that came in. Well, obviously they came to campus for spring quarter. Now, spring practice had started at the tail end of winter quarter. All these guys were around. Obviously, they're not enrolled. They're not part of the program yet, so they weren't able to take part in practices. But they were around, and they were hanging out and working out on their own, quote unquote, on their own. And I'm sure watching, observing, being as much a part as they could. But now spring quarter's here, they've enrolled, and they're able to to take full part. So today, Monday, was that first practice of spring quarter, and obviously we're not seeing much news coming out. Northwestern is a program that doesn't have media flocking every spring practice, looking for juicy tidbits. It's just never the way we've operated. But we'll see if there is even a spring game or kind of what that looks like at the end of spring practice. But just getting a few visuals popping out of the Walter Field House. It's good to see. Yeah.
Even if it is just a shadow of a photo, knowing that this was the first time Aiden Childs is out in Northwestern gear throwing footballs, and it's like, in a lot of ways, especially, I think we're all very familiar that Northwestern has been on the transfer highway when it comes to quarterbacks, and given that there seems to be this pivot every year, right? Where we're like, okay, here's the new transfer quarterback, and here's the first time we're seeing the big new transfer quarterback throwing footballs. And in a lot of ways, for some people, that is a pivot point into the new season. Well, that's what we got today with Aiden Childs. So cool. And obviously, we know the Chip Kelly piece of this too, right? Like, this is one of the first times that he, right, above board, certainly gets out there in Walter Athletic Center, out on the field, and is actually able to start coaching Childs up. So pretty cool stuff. As long as we're talking Cats and football, obviously, we're starting to enter the run-up to the NFL draft in a situation that's going to be a really interesting NFL draft. And obviously, it's going to put some real meat on the bone for our live draft show. But Caleb Tiernan has gone from a guy where it's like, oh boy, I sure hope he can get into the second round, to a guy where we're going to be like, let's see a run on tackles early in the first and see what happens. Because his combine was just fantastic. Not just his times, but just the way he looked. I mean, and we were just having a discussion about this today, of someone just being like, it's the way that he's 6'8", 320, and can move, and that anyone who saw him, at the combine could just see that, right? Evan Berenstain also, had a good combine, and then pro days, you got like Aiden Hubbard just had some, his vertical leap just unbelievable, and then also pro day performances like Carmine Bastone really kind of put up some really impressive numbers. The most bench presses on the bench press reps on the team. I think he put up 31. Then ran like a 4.91. These are numbers that are very competitive with, and I think like also was like 3-cone drill, a couple other things where he's just like, he's looking at like top 5, top 3 available defensive tackles in this draft. So again, like you start getting, all it takes is one team to fall in love with you, 2 teams to fall in love with you, you know, and you really hope you start to see that in the latter rounds of the draft. But this is going to be one of those drafts where I think everyone's, there are a lot of guys where you don't know exactly where they're going to go, but you know what it could be. And I think that's going to make things really exciting for us.
Yeah. Definitely excited to kind of see the lead up continue, see where things go. Maybe there will be something fun to talk about at the tail end of the first round now that the Broncos aren't there anymore. After
knock wood, furiously knocking wood.
Yeah. So we'll kind of see how this goes. Anything else to mention before we get out of here tonight?
Well, we mentioned it on Twitter and people seem to be enjoying it, so I'll just reiterate that some of you might be aware that UConn and Duke played a basketball game over the weekend that may, perhaps that's come up once or twice.
Did it? I don't know.
You might have heard something about it. But obviously UConn erases this 19-point Duke lead in the second half, comes all the way back. And obviously, anyone who's really, got their ear to the grindstone of college basketball knows that UConn learned that kind of second half fight when they played Northwestern in the tournament and built that big lead on Northwestern that should have put the game to bed. But Boo Buie and company wouldn't let that happen and battled back and made it a game. And UConn learned what fight was and what second half spirit was. And they brought that. They honored Northwestern through their performance in the second half of this Duke game. That's the way we'll choose to remember it. That's the way you should choose to remember it too.
Amen to that, brother. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and leave it there for tonight. Head to our website, westlawpirates.com, where you can leave comments and questions. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, all our socials at Westlaw Pirates, and you can always email us, westlawpirates@gmail.com. Tune in next time as we give our visceral and statistical views on Northwestern athletics, and look for us in the west side of Ryan Field flying the red pirate flag, because we give no quarter, especially the fourth. For John Lacombe, I'm Sam Walter. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.